Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Power Man Podcast. My name's Rory Paquette. You all know that, but I like to say that every once in a while just to kind of remind myself of who's still sitting in this chair and how lucky I am to be the guy doing it. Folks, I am eternally grateful for what you have done. When we moved to 5 days a week, you folks stepped up. You really did. It was absolutely amazing. The sharing, the subscribing, the notes, the DMs, and you guys all know I respond to those personally. So I'm still getting caught up. Give me a minute. I'll get there. All right, but it's me. So you're gonna get some gold. I promise. Um, then when we made the move to 7 days this past week, I mean, you guys came through with the DMs like there was no tomorrow. I think most of you made fun of me, like, "Don't you have a life? Do you have anything else to do?" You guys were great. So I want to thank you for all of that. If you're not out there doing what you're doing, I don't get to sit over here and do what I'm doing. So thank you for that. Now, if you are a friend of the program, and I know most of you are, then you know what time it is. We got to pay a couple of bills. So let me take a sip of my preferred beverage. Ooh, good stuff, man. Just made a new fresh pot of that. Oh, you guys all know what we're drinking. That's right. It's Freedom Hill Coffee at Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram. Go look them up, check them out, see what they got. Deep, dark, rich, bold, and beautiful, just like my wife. They are absolutely fantastic at everything that they do. They do all the right things for all the right reasons, and they support veterans. Folks, you all know how important that is to us here at the Power Man Podcast. And to all of you who are veterans out there, thank you for your service. We love you, and you know that you have a home here. So, and you have a home with Freedom Hill Coffee at Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram. Look them up. I need one more sip of this so I can keep up with this maniac across the table from me, this young buck. Hold on. All right. Let me introduce our guest today. He is a kindred spirit, and he is in the right spot. Let me just tell you, the host of the Revolutionary Man podcast, Alain Dumonceaux. All right, Dumonceaux. I said it right, and then I said it wrong. Alain Dumonceaux. How you doing, Alan?
I'm doing great, Rory, and that's actually perfect pronunciation. Well done, my friend.
Thank you. All right. Listen, I love your podcast. Had a chance to listen to several episodes. I know that you have a lot of things that you do that are similar to what we do here, and that's one of the reasons why I really was excited about bringing you on, because I think that in this space, the rising tide really raises all ships. I mean, we're all doing what we're trying to do for similar causes. We have a lot to talk about. You've got some cool programs. But before we get into all that, tell our listeners, who is, Alan? What are you about? What brings you here today, brother?
Man, Rory, I just want to say congratulations on moving the podcast to 7 days. That's a lot of effort on your part. I'm sure that message that you're putting out there is getting across to thousands and thousands of people. So well done. And
Thanks.
for me, I got started in this business of doing men's work because of a couple of really, I would say, difficult and challenging situations in my life. One was almost losing my second marriage, and we can go back a little bit further on that, but that was really critical key piece for me because I thought I had learned a lesson 25 years earlier, and it was obvious that I hadn't. And not long out as we were working through, rekindling and fixing our marriage, that my father-in-law passed away. And my father-in-law was more like a dad to me than he was a father-in-law. We were really close. He loved sports. I love sports. He's a huge Yankees fan. I ended up by having to go to the dark side and became a huge Yankees fan because of him. But we always, got along so well. And so when he passed away and I was the one who ultimately found him, it was so devastating for me. I didn't have anywhere to go. And I found that in today's environment, as men, we really have put ourselves in isolation in lots of situations, and we don't have anywhere to go out. And I have close friends, and I'm sure you do too, and I'm sure your listeners do. But are you able to have the conversation and do the work that's needed within that environment? And I would offer to suggest that that probably doesn't exist. And so I decided that something needed to be done. We needed to do something different. So we created this program that helps men get an opportunity to work through the most challenging season and time of their life. And so it's a great opportunity to talk to you about that work today and share some insights together.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. I'm sorry for your loss. With that's brutal. Now you said you came over to the dark side. If the Yankees are the dark side, what's the good side?
So I live in Canada here, so hockey's a big sport up here. So I'm a huge Montreal Canadiens fan. And at the time, the Habs, affectionately called the Habs had more championships than the Yankees by two. Then, of course, during the time together spending with my father-in-law, the Yankees did surpass that great legacy that the Habs created. But really, they're two iconic brands in the marketplace, and so we like to kibitz back and forth a little bit about who was the more powerful and evil empire, and obviously with so far the Yankees have done such a great job of doing that. And I have to admit, I'm truly a rekindled fan, especially with guys like Aaron Judge on the team, and it's just awesome to see the boys doing so well.
All right, I love that. I just wondered. I was like, you're not like a Red Sox fan or something, are you? I couldn't figure that out. I'm like, I know you're Canadian. What am I missing? All right, well that all right like, makes a little more sense. I can rest easy now. Now knowing the equation there. And you had said that you could go back a little further. I know that you had mentioned that you had kind of lost it all, and then you said almost twice. And so you kind of went through it and then almost went through it again, but somehow you stopped yourself, right?
Yeah, what ultimately ended up by happening was, my wife and I were in a really troubled time in our relationship. I wasn't showing up like I needed to be. As a matter of fact, there was some infidelity being involved and happening. But she gave me an opportunity to not just redeem and rekindle what was there, but she gave me an opportunity to actually put into practice and to play what I knew was important. And so for me, showing up and being in integrity in all facets of my life wasn't happening. And so let's go back a few years here, and way back when, and I started off my life as a chef, a professional chef, and I competed in the culinary Olympics in the early '90s. And married my high school sweetheart. Life looked beautiful, but from the outside, that's what it was. But in the inside, things were falling apart. The marriage at the time was falling apart. We had two young children. Nothing was working for us, and the pressure mounted so much that we ended up by getting split up and divorced, and it cost me literally everything. Bankruptcy, depression for a couple of years, trying to work through things, had a stint of being unemployed. But it was also an opportunity for me to really get into understanding how could someone be so successful in one aspect of their life and then just suck horribly everywhere else. And so I really ran on this journey of learning and understanding. I took a bunch of training and courses, a certified NLP and hypnotherapy and emotional intelligence. But guess what? You can take all the courses you want, go to all the weekend seminars you want, listen to all the podcasts you want. But if you're not actually going to do the work, it doesn't really mean a whole lot. And so that's what ended up by happening with my second marriage. And thankfully, my wife was much more wise than I was at the time to recognize that she could see the man that still needed to be revealed and gave me that opportunity to do that. And so it's a long story and a long journey. I think many of us travel, and hopefully through today's conversation, your audience is going to get a couple of gems.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they will. That's never easy. It's just never easy. And so many of us, myself included, we go through the first marriage and we're kind of trying to figure it out as we go. There's no handbook for it. As men, we're just expected to know this is what you do. This is how it's supposed to work, right? And parenting is the same way. You have a kid and you're like, well, I'm just supposed to know. I'm a dad. And if I ask anybody, well, now I'm weak. Now I'm a dad who doesn't know anything, right? So, how many kids do you have?
Yeah, I have two boys, both from my first marriage. So my oldest is
Oh,
33 and my youngest is 30. Both, let's say as we're talking about, parenting, because of what had transpired from the relationship with their mom and how I was handling things, I didn't show up great as well. And so my eldest at the age of 16, so her and I separated when they were just starting to go to school. And so fast forward about 10 years, 11 years from there, my oldest started to get involved with in the drug scene. And
mm,
unfortunately, he's made some really challenging decisions over the course of his life and has really struggled with being in a healthy spot. So imagine what that's like as a father trying to show up as
yeah.
best as you can and yet not be that cross that line of being that enabler but still wanting to be there to support him. And so it's been a journey. It's another reason that I stepped into doing this work because I know there's many guys that may not have a great relationship with their children. And so what does that look like? And how can we start to rekindle and rebuild that relationship?
Right. That's tough. That's a tough one right there. Yeah, I feel for you. But I love the fact that you're willing to share the story. I love that you do that on your podcast, when you talk about the real stuff that's happened. And frankly, it's probably why you've been around as long as you have, doing what you're doing, is because you're authentic about it, and you're real. There's plenty of guys who have never had a problem, grew up with the silver spoon. It's all been, sunshine and rainbows, and they're like, no, this is how you get over obstacles in life. And you look at them like, have you ever had one?
Yeah.
So when you've really been in the trenches and you're talking to men about being in the trenches, they know,
Yeah.
men know if you're the real deal or if you're, full of it. So, um, that had to present some challenges though. You're trying to come back and show up and change yourself. And at the same token, did you have to do something different in order to, work with your son, who was having those issues, in a different way, or did that match the development you were trying to do for yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question, Roy. It did and it didn't match. Part of the challenge is we start diving into, really we're talking about personal development, some self-help stuff. And the challenge with the self-help industry is that everything is about, hey, just be positive, smile, right? Just, go out and get after it. But when you're facing a situation where someone is really struggling in their life and they're struggling to make healthy decisions, that doesn't always cut it. And so I found in my journey that it was better for me to try to meet him where he was at and not be the type of parent that would be always prodding and challenging him that, oh, you can do better. And I didn't do that in the beginning. I didn't do that for probably half the time that he's been struggling because I didn't know any better. I got bought into this belief that, well, if you just, you know, think positive thoughts and do make good choices, then everything is great. Well, that's fine when you have a healthy disposition, but when you don't, we need to be able to have this other side of the conversation, which is really about creating space. And that kind of feels sticky for guys.
Yeah.
It's that kind of, well, that's what women do, right? They create space. Well, listen, gentlemen, creating space just means to be quiet. Ultimately, for me, that's what it's come down to: is can I be quiet and listen and truly be present for my son when he's talking? Can I be there to hear what he has to say? And instead of trying to offer advice or coaching, how can I support him with where he's at? And so it becomes more of asking questions about
Mm.
how he's doing, what's going on for him, what are the things that are bothering him and challenging him today, what kind of support can I provide for him? And we've grown now to the point where when I ask that question, he knows it's not going to be financially any longer because it's the choices that he makes with it doesn't end up in a great spot. But he knows that at least the door is there for him, that I'm available to hear him talk, and that if he needs something, if he needs somebody to take him to go get help, that I'm there. But that wasn't always the case before. So I think really when we start to learn and grow as men, we have to understand that being a parent isn't always about having the right answer or even having an answer. Sometimes it's just being there.
That's a great point. Right there. And I think that we get lost in that a lot too. We are basically like, hey, we have to have the right answer. So whatever I can come up with, I've got to give an answer on this. And then you look back and you're like, man, why did I do that? Why did I say that way? It didn't make any sense. But that's a great point. Being there and meeting them where they are, those are really, really important things. Um, how has that differed with your other son? If you don't mind me asking about it.
Yeah,
And
sure. So it's caused some challenges with the other son. I think if anyone who's been involved in a situation where you have a child that's taking a lot of energy of the family, guess what ends up by happening? Some that gets neglect is happening with the other one. So my youngest son, we have an on and off again relationship where he still has resentment about how his mom and I have handled his brother. And part of the challenge is if for his work to do is that he always saw his brother as this larger than life image to be this guy that he looked up to. And when he didn't, turn out to be like that, he really struggled, and it took him really hard, but he couldn't understand why, we were so willing to keep participating and helping. And until you have children, I think that's going to be hard for any child to really understand
Yeah.
what that's like. And so one of the things that's really important again for me is to make sure that with my youngest one, that again, he knows that he's just as valued and just as important in our lives, and how we have conversations are slightly different. It is about, he is asking more questions and wanting some more support. And so the dynamic between how we talk is a little different. He doesn't always like to hear what dad has to say. That's okay. We've learned to find what that boundary looks like when our conversations,
Yeah.
but it's just a little bit different because he's in a different headspace.
For sure. Yeah, I understand. We're diving in, and this is awesome. I appreciate you sharing what you're sharing. But you kind of let me take a step back, just in terms of talking about Alan for a minute, because my listeners may or may not know who you are yet, but hey, they're going to know now. And you just sort of glanced over the fact that you're like some kind of serious chef, and you were in the the culinary Olympics, and were you silver medaled? Is that right? Is that the info that I
Yeah.
got right? Okay. Uh, How does that happen?
Yeah, that's yeah. Every time I bring this up, people are just like, "What? There's an Olympics for chefs?" Well, this, you got to remember, this is going on probably. Well, I got involved with it in the late '80s, early '90s. It's been going on much longer than that. It runs every 4 years on the Olympics, on the summer Olympic calendar. And what it is just an opportunity for chefs from around the world, both national and regional teams, to get together and participate in these hot and cold competitions. So think this is the first version of Iron Chef. Like long before there was a food
Wow.
TV and Bobby Flay and and all this stuff going on, there were these competitions, and it was an opportunity for us to showcase our skill set, not just in terms of plate composition and flavors and textures and color, but also in our skill set and how we were able to um, you know, do different types of cuts. It was very much a technical Olympics versus where it is today is really about flavor and appeal and just a little bit different. So I competed in the cold competitions as in the regional category. The hot competitions were kept for the national teams. And in the time that I was competing, Canada had been world champions 3 years in a row, and had done extremely well. And so I was lucky. One of the team members that was on Team Canada actually mentored our regional team here, and so it was a great opportunity to learn about myself. One of probably the first opportunities I stepped into really feeling that imposter syndrome. You're looking around, you're just going, wow, the talent here. And again, I'll go back to a hockey analogy that I always considered myself to be like that third line player. Like I could understand the game and get in there, but what would take me hours upon hours to build, my mentor could do it in a third of the time because he just had a gift. He was just natural with it. I still ended up with the similar product, but it just took me a lot longer to get there. And so that experience of being around so much talent and seeing the support and camaraderie really felt great for my development.
Hmm. Okay, that support system, being around your peers and stuff. Is that one of the things that kind of led you towards, doing what you're doing now with, group coaching for men and things like that? I mean, or, what was the journey, from the early Iron Chef, culinary Olympics to men's coach?
Yeah, I've always had this feeling and this idea of wanting to create something where guys can get together. And so as my tenure finished with the culinary team and fell in back into the everyday work, I felt that there was this loss of peace of doing something. And I don't mean, many of us, depending on what your sport of choice is, if it's baseball or hockey or what have you, you'll have your men's leagues, your beer leagues, so to speak, to participate. But I find those types of events are a lot different. The types of conversations aren't necessarily very deep. Guys are still somewhat reserved. And so there isn't this real feeling of this deep connection. We're just getting out. Oh, great. I don't have to look after the kids tonight. So I'm going to go play some rec hockey. But wanting to find an environment where guys can actually talk about things that are really on their heart and bothering them, like struggling with being a parent, or I'm not connecting with my wife anymore, or, my career. I'm at a point in my career that I just don't know why I'm doing this anymore. Where do they go to have that and that environment? And so many guys come to the group and just sit there and see their brothers in arms dealing with similar things, maybe not the same, and they have a place where someone actually gets what it is that they're trying to say. And I think that's what really drove me to create and get into this type of environment.
Nice. Nice. Okay. The no, we're jumping around a little bit, but I'm just trying to paint a picture of, Alan here, and for the guys that are listening, so you've got that makes sense, on what you're looking for. Congrats on the, silver medal, by the way, for the Culinary Olympics. I want to put a point on that. I mean, that's no small achievement. So congratulations on that. That's awesome. Um, as you're moving forward, you're putting this together, and you're dealing with everything that's going on in your life. First family,
Mm-hmm.
second wife, so on. You mentioned early on that your current wife was, smarter than you, which I think we're all fortunate enough to have that happen at some point, hopefully. But what transpired there? Did she just say, "Hey, this is what we need to do"? This is what you need to do? I mean, what sort of line was drawn in which, she said, "Hey, here's the change that needs to be made"? How did that come about?
Yeah, ultimately, when everything was crumbling around us, the conversation that we ultimately had was that she said to me, I don't want to be a statistic, but in order for me to not be a statistic, you need to be different. And and at the time, I can tell you the what I didn't recognize is that I went from a first wife who, really just lived through me. And then when the kids came along, she lived through the kids. And so I had this environment where I was really the center of attention. And so that really fed into my ego. And then when everything collapsed with that one coming in and meeting my current wife, she's the polar opposite of that. Very independent, very strong woman, very
Hmm.
opinionated. And while that's what attracted me to it over the years, I also saw myself really evolve more and more into my father. I watched my mother and my father had a very similar dynamic. My mom was very boisterous, and she'd always be, shooting down my father. I think over the years, though, after as I got older, that they probably had a different conversation after all of us kids were gone or in bed. But I started to emulate that, where I wouldn't fight back because I was afraid that, hey, maybe if I say something, things aren't going to turn out. So I became the proverbial nice guy. But all that did was just train, you know, in air quotes, train my wife that it was okay for her to step over top of me,
Right.
to treat me like a child, like another child. And so once our relationship evolved to that, where I was just being, pretty much emasculated, I didn't see it as her problem. I saw it ultimately that, well, that was my problem. How can I put anything on my wife when this is what I said is okay? This behavior is okay. Telling me that I can't go do something or have something is okay. And so when she said that she didn't want to be that statistic and I needed to change, I knew what she meant. And that meant I really needed to change how I showed up. And I have to tell you, it was extremely difficult because I was so uncomfortable with wanting to come forward and saying and letting her know, I really don't appreciate how you just spoke to me. As simple or as maybe as silly as that sounds, for me, that was really a tough thing to do. And I think it was probably because of, again, my upbringing, being the oldest of five.
Hmm.
And my father, really felt that it was, spare the rod, spoil the child type of growth that both my brother and I, who were about 12 months apart, we wore our father out. By the time we were 7 and 8, like I'm sure he was tired from having to take care of us and keep us in line. And so I always had a fear of authority. So authority doesn't necessarily mean, somebody who's a boss, but someone who holds power over you or you've given power to. It's probably a better way to put it.
Yeah.
And I had done that with my wife. I gave her so much power. And so, if I say something, what does that mean? Does that mean I'm going to be divorced? Am I going to lose everything again? Maybe I better not say anything. Well, in 12 months from now, what is this argument going to mean? That might be an okay statement to make, but if that's your default, which ultimately became mine, it really led to a relationship that was so one-sided. We didn't, we didn't really have a foundation. I have to tell you though that since the incident and since us rebuilding, the foundation that we've built today is so much stronger and so much better because we both know that we need to show up now better. Now I'm in a position I can say, and I do say, what's on my mind. I still have to work on it on occasion on how it comes across, but there's a lot less gray. There's more clarity in the relationship, and that takes practice. It takes courage, and you have to be willing to lean in to do that. And I'm just grateful that I had that opportunity to do that with Kimmy instead of having to figure it out with someone else.
Yeah. That's it's a great story. The it's a huge realization to come to, because most men who are in your position are going to say, she is the problem. She treats me this way, and you caught yourself and said, wait a minute. She's treating me this way because I've allowed her to treat me this way, and I allowed this to become the norm. And when you took ownership of that, then you got your power back to go in there and start to deal with it. But I mean, it's an awesome realization, but it's so difficult to do. Um, how did you start the process of, you know, taking back that power of becoming this, different man that you wanted to be? You're recognizing it, you're seeing, hey, this is what I need to do. It's on me. I got to change. Did you have a mentor? Did you take a course? I mean, is this something that just happened naturally for you? How did you start making that transformation?
Yeah, I started to really dive into men's work and diving into anything and everything I could read. Their podcasts weren't that big then.
Right.
I did look at a couple of men's courses that were popular, and spent some time in there learning and developing. I have to say, like the challenge is that when you half the equation is okay, you recognize that you got to change. I recognize I need to change. And so what inevitably happens as you start to change, guess what? It's hard for your spouse now because they want the new guy, but they're used to the old guy.
Right. You've changed
So
the
as I
game.
start to,
Yeah.
yeah, so as I start to change in how I'm showing up and play the game, now it's just like, I don't know if I like this guy that much anymore. And so it was difficult for us. And so one of the things that I did was coming in and saying, okay, listen, there's something I need to get off my chest. I don't know if I'm going to say it very well. I'm probably not going to say it really, really very well. So I'm just going to say it. And then I would just spill the beans. Now I didn't go and take on the most challenging thing in our relationships out of the gate because, you know, that's pretty messy and that could lead to a path that you may not be able to come back from. So I just started with smaller things like, okay, if I say I'm going to go do something, I'm just letting you know as a courtesy, it's not for your approval. And
Hmm.
so if there's something else on the plate that you want to talk about, well, I was planning on doing this. Okay, so what could we do then to plan better? Because we are pretty spontaneous as a couple. And so then that would have a different conversation where in the past I would say, oh yeah, okay, dear. Yeah, whatever you want to do. And then I would just acquiesce and not do what I'm doing, but have resentment about it. Quietly go, geez,
Hmm.
why am I doing this? And so it challenged her to grow as well, not because I was forcing it her, is really because I wanted to show up differently and start talk about things. And so that was one of the really the early things we did. And then we went back to doing something that we hadn't done in years, which was really asking each other on a weekly basis on a scale of 1 to 10, where are we showing, how are we showing up as a couple for you? And if it was anything below a 7, then what can each of us do to get that back to at least a 7? And so, that challenged us to have a conversation. And so one of the things that I think is key for us is to, when we're involved in having these types of conversations, is to truly be in a place of, this is what's happening for me. And that can be difficult to, instead of trying to, when you're saying things and it sounds like you're pointing the finger at them. Yes, you're bringing up maybe a behavior or something, but this is what's happening for me. This is how it's landing for me. And when it lands for me, I just either maybe it's I don't know how to do with that, or I feel this, or I feel that. And that challenges us as men to really have an understanding of what's going on with us emotionally in our body. And that can be really difficult because we've never been taught or trained to do that.
Right. Interesting. Wow. So when you first started making these changes, and I know you said that it's like, hey, she wants the new guy, right? But then,
Yeah.
the changes happen and she's like, do I really? Right? Was this a big discussion about what was going to happen? Like, did you have to sit down and say, hey, here's my plan. I'm going to start changing things. Be ready. Or did you just start changing them and then she noticed and so on? I mean, how did that really come into play?
Yeah, I was more organic for sure. I wouldn't say that I had any real structure on it, other than I knew, and it's a point I want to make sure that I'm really clear on. Just because my wife said that she didn't want to be a statistic, man, I have a challenge time saying that word, doesn't mean that I was off the hook. At any given moment, she could have changed her mind and said, "Yeah, you know what, we're done. Like I just can't, I can't do it."
Yeah.
And so every day for me was a day of that I knew I needed to show up differently. I have to show up differently. That stress, I'll say, that challenge is much less today, although it's still present, because it's easy for us to fall back onto really old habits. And so as I think about, that progress, it was really much more organic. It did start a lot, but with just letting her know when things were happening, the behaviors that I didn't care for or appreciate, was just addressing that in the moment. And then as we got comfortable and we got better at having that conversation about the in the moment behavior or thing that's happening, then we could sit down and talk about something much deeper. And that usually came out more around if we planned a date night, for example, or we're planned an outing, or we're doing something that's taking us out of our normal daily routine, where we truly are focused on, okay, let's talk about things that are really important in our marriage. I'd say it was much more organic than it was planned.
Hmm. Interesting. I mean, and how long ago was that when that started for you guys?
Yeah, I'd say maybe 6 or 7 years ago,
Okay. All
like
right.
just before I started doing men's work.
Right. Okay. So from that, then you take all this and you say, hey, I'm doing this anyway, so I'm going to teach it to other men.
Yeah, 100%. I just, when you start to work at things, you just notice it, right? You just see it around. I could see more and more listening to the conversations that were happening in my work environment, listening to conversations, happening at church or at wherever we were at. And so I would start to talk about, okay, and I would challenge guys. So, well, how are you showing up, Rory? It sounds like maybe there might be some stuff going on for you. Let's talk about that. And some guys are open to having that conversation.
Hmm.
Others would kind of give me the side eye look and wonder, where is this guy coming from? But it was really about a place of, I just don't want to see any more families fall apart, see any more men struggle, because especially as we get older as men, we're seeing the separation and divorce rate of older men, of like older, like couples have been together for a long time, getting higher and higher. And what ends up by happening for a lot of men is that they don't know what to do. They can't deal with that. And so now they really struggle. And so, if there was truly a mission for me, it's about really saving marriages and saving men's lives from that ultimate disaster that can be if everything falls apart for them, because we don't have the tools, we don't have the skill set to be able to survive something like that, especially as we get on.
Yeah, I love the mission, and I love, when people like you, are called to serve that, So the movement, so to speak, is I'm it's better for to have you. So I'm really glad that you're doing that. Um, the maybe it's different in Canada. In the United States, especially, back when you and I were kind of getting these things started, we're very similar in timing too, in terms of when we started and what we did. Um, when I started, the entire movement itself, I mean, if you use the word masculinity, it was hate outpouring from every corner. Was it that way for you when you first got started?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The moment that you started talking about, doing, somebody would ask me, what are you doing, for yourself? And I'd say I'm doing this men's work, and what's that all about? It's really about helping men, reclaim their masculinity, their masculine edge, or something to that effect. And sometimes you'd get that look like, ooh, that's bad. And the challenge is that we live in an environment where, so much in social media, so much on our TV, and the stuff that's happening shows that they like to portray this image of anything being masculine is bad. And that's not the case. It starts talking about, well, the patriarchy is the cause of all the evil in Western
Right.
society. It's not the cause of all the evil in society. There's lots of reasons why there's things are the way they are. And to pin it and simplify it down to it's men's problem. And I don't think that was the intention of the original feminine movement, but it sure shifted that way. And it sure made it to the point today where when you have a powerful image like Donald is in running the US, people don't know how to deal with that. I live in Canada. We just voted in Mr. Carney. He looks like a boy in how he's handling things. That's not a slight to I'm sure he's a very intelligent man. I know he's an intelligent man, but
Yeah.
how we handle ourselves and how we show up says a lot about who we are and where we're grounded. And so to say that one is better than the other, or one is
Sure.
is worse than the other, I think is where the challenge is. I think for men, we want to show up with authenticity. We want to show up what's important and real for us in our lives. And if that means, once in a while we need to put our proverbial foot down, so to speak, or we need to change our mind on something, I think that's all part of growing and evolving. Because if a woman decides to do that, what is she called? She's called a boss babe. Oh, she's a boss babe. She's doing all that. But have a guy do that, and all of a sudden that's toxic. I think there's
Right.
toxic behavior, and then that can happen for anybody. But it's how we show up as just being masculine is just a part of who we are as men. It's how we ultimately do things, and it's how we harness that. And we can harness that for good, or we can harness that for not. And that's all a matter of perspective.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I'm not the only one who went through it. I feel better a little bit.
Yeah.
Misery loves company. So, no, for sure though. Again, I applaud you for going through that because back when we were getting these things started, it was not easy. It wasn't
No.
just pick up a mic and start talking. Everybody was like, "Oh, I love what you're saying. Hey, let me listen." It was a lot worse than that. Let me ask you a couple questions about your program and what you do, okay, and the work that you do. I know that you put something in your notes here about there's 3 ways to learn wisdom, and so this sounds like it's
Yeah.
something that you talk about a lot. You want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's so important for us to really understand and learn how wisdom comes. And we had one of the great conversation one evening in with our men's group, and we talked about what comes first, knowledge, what's more important, knowledge or wisdom. And really, the idea is that knowledge is important, but knowledge and then not applying it doesn't really give you any wisdom. And so, in order for us to truly gain wisdom, we need to pay attention to what's happening in our life. And so, one of the easiest ways for us to really gain wisdom is really through imitation. It's when you see somebody who's doing something well that you want to imitate them. That's how we build businesses, right? You try to emulate what's going on. You see how you're doing things. How did I learn how to be a chef and to compete? Is I emulated my mentors, and what they were doing. I asked questions. How do I do that? And then as I applied myself, and I was able to gain some knowledge and some wisdom that I could impart not only for myself but for others that I'm learning and working with. The other way, though, that we can truly gain wisdom is to taking a moment and to reflect. Now, for some of us, that'll mean maybe journaling. Others, it might be a moment for meditation, but reflecting on things that have happened in our past and asking the questions of what are all the lessons I could have learned, I can learn from this experience. Because sometimes we just get one or two lessons and we don't necessarily go any further. And so what are the different lessons I can learn? So easiest is through invitation. One of the more noble ones is to really reflect. And yet the most bitterest, but the one that probably gives us the most depth of wisdom is through experience. Until we're willing to lean in and try having the difficult conversations with my wife in the early days to repair the marriage took courage and strength to do that. It was difficult, but I gained so much wisdom about how I was showing up. And then I could lean back on my emotional intelligence training and start to pay attention to what was happening with her. Is her skin tone changing? Is she breathing different? Am I breathing differently? Man, am I getting upset about this? So we have opportunity to learn if we're wanting to be aware. So for me, it's really about reflection and imitation and experience. And if we're paying attention in those three areas, I think you'll gain a lot of wisdom in a very short period of time.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Can't disagree with anything you just said. That's awesome. Now, in regards to that and some of the principles and the things that you kind of teach, and things that you represent, in your men's group, you've got something I believe it's called Band of Brothers.
Yeah. Yeah,
You want to tell everybody
that's
about
our
that? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's our group mentoring program. So again, one of the things that was important for me was to get a bunch of men around and get together to talk and work on things. And so our group program is really an opportunity to do just that. I encourage all the guys when they come in to go through one of our first modules, and that is that I call Return to the King. And the Return to the King idea is about crafting a personal mission statement for our lives. Because remember when we were young and somebody would ask us, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And most of us, I would suggest, probably had something in their mind. And then fast forward 20, 30, maybe it's 40 years, and ask yourself a similar question. What do I want to, now that I'm older, did I become what I wanted to be? And I would say that for many of us, we didn't, and we've lost that luster. And so this is an opportunity for them to regain and reclaim what's truly important in their life. Obviously, at this stage in life, things will have changed. It'll be much different. You might not want to be an astronaut anymore or a firefighter or whatever it is that you would want it to do. And so something may be different. But if we're not aware of what our personal mission statement is, what do I stand up for? What am I willing to put myself on the line for? What's truly meaningful for me? Then it'll be a difficult place to live. And so we ask all the guys to go through that process so that when we start to talk about the subjects, and this year our theme is living with integrity. And the idea and the concept is, how are we living in integrity in our six life pillars, which is financial, emotional, spiritual, in our professions, and in our relationships and physically. And if we can show up with integrity in all these different areas, we can be what I would say is a whole man. And so it's a great opportunity. We meet monthly. It's a great chance for us to talk about things, to work through things. And the group's been pretty successful. I'm really proud of the guys and the work that they're doing.
That's awesome. No, I love that. I mean, you've got all the tenants, everything's all set up. So it sounds like very well thought out and very well put together group. Congratulations on the success of it. I think that's awesome. The Now you mentioned the Hero's Quest. So is
Yeah.
that part of one of these other ones? Did I miss something there? Tell us about that.
Yeah. So the Hero's Quest, I was as I was building our program and thinking about what guys are going to show up with different levels of needs. And so while the Band of Brothers, our group program, is phenomenal and we have to do some great work in there. I wanted to have something that can go a little bit deeper. And so Heroes Quest is a 12-month program. It's opportunity to dive really deep into something, into who you are and what it is that you're wanting to evolve to, and having and not just a personal mission statement, but for a mission statement of who you want, the kind of man you want to become at the end of that time together. And so it's a combination. You get to participate in the group program, but you get tons of one-on-one time with me. Actually, in the first 90 days, there's eight check-ins with me because that's really important. I knew as the beginning of trying to repair my marriage and get my life back on track that I needed to show up regularly and I needed to have something in place. And so I can be fairly disciplined when it comes to that kind of stuff, but I recognize that others may need some help. So it's really front end loaded. There's tons of work at the front end for the guys to do, but it also gives them that opportunity now to really leap forward and see deep growth. So whether that's working on your marriage, your relationship with your kids, or maybe it's a career change you're looking at. Maybe you're, as you know, I've got guys that are in their 60s and now they're looking at retirement, and so there's other things going on. Whatever life stage, there's opportunity for them to really get clear on what that looks like, and over the course of the year, we can do that work together.
Nice, nice. Again, it sounds very cool. The um, I mean, any of the guys that are listening to this right now, let me just tell you, like I said, this is not a competition. If any of you guys out there that are not in my group, because you know what, you're all not in my group. So listen up, gentlemen. If you like what this guy has to say, you're vibing with Alan over here. You know what? I don't care what group you're in, be in a group. And this guy's got a really good setup. So if you're not working with me, you know what? Give this guy a call. All right. Click one of the links that we're going to have in the bio or in the show notes rather, and get yourselves in here and get some stuff going. The podcast. But
Yeah.
like I said, listen to it, really like it. Sounds like you bring in people to talk on topics of interest, but how do you use the podcast in conjunction with the rest of the movement that you have going?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, it's similar to what you're doing with your show. It is primarily interview based. Although this year I've really challenged myself to put out more. You're 7 days. I'm a weekly, looking to add a second day to the show. The idea was to bring in guests who what I would describe are have gone through or going through their hero's quest. They've
Hmm.
faced or are facing their life and death rebirth experience, and they've come through. And what did that teach them? What did that help them do? How did that help them evolve and become? Because as you were alluding to at the start of your show, is that I also feel that I don't know when the teacher will appear for my listener. And so maybe the guest that I have on is that teacher, and that finally clicks for them, and they take that next step and join a group or they do something. And so the focus is on that. It's about making sure that someone has had that type of experience, and then I keep the topics in and around those 6 pillars that I just talked about in order to give guys an opportunity to really take a hold of, yeah, you know what, I am working on my spiritual aspect of it, and so I have some experts in to talk about that evolution for themselves or in their profession. They're business owners, and you know, they've gone through the collapse of 2008, for example, and have been able to rebuild their lives
Yeah,
and in a much more positive way. So that's the focus of it. I use it as opportunity to get people out there to get a sense of what our work is all about here with the Revolutionary Man, and it's an opportunity to get out and meet some really interesting and amazing people.
beautiful. I love it. I really do. Um, okay, so folks, there's another thing too. When you're done listening to my podcast, but only when you're done listening to my podcast, then you can go listen to Alan's. All right, and check it out. He's got some really good guests on there. He talks about some really cool topics. All right, listen, Alan, I love what you've brought today. I really do. I love highlighting other men who are in this battle, in this cause, who are putting themselves out there, telling their stories, and trying to help other men. There's not enough of us. There needs to be more, and the ones that need to show up are guys who are talking about what I talk about, guys who are talking about what you're talking about. There have been some pretenders that have showed up here lately, and we need to kind of push them back out and bring in some actual men who really do want to help. And you're definitely one of those guys. I appreciate you greatly for what you're doing. As we kind of wrap things together here, in the interest of time and your time, I want to make sure there isn't anything I've missed. Is there anything I didn't ask you? Is there anything that we talked about and you want to go back and stress a little more? Or do you have maybe just a leave behind, a nugget or some advice or anything like that for the guys? The floor is yours for the last, minute or two, brother, and just take it wherever you want to go.
You betcha. Absolutely appreciate that. If I was to think about everything that we talked about today, and something that I would like the listeners to take away from is remember that whatever it is that you're working on, whether we're working it on through my men's group, or you're doing it through Rory's group, or wherever you're finding that, remember that it isn't about liberating. Don't think that coming here that we're here to save you. I don't think anybody can save anyone. We have to liberate ourselves, and there's a big difference in that. And what that requires is for us to show up. And because you're listening to this podcast, it tells me that you're the type of man that wants to be liberated. And so that gives us an opportunity to really break free from these chains that we've put on ourselves, this cage, this identity of who we think we are because of our past experiences. And maybe there's an opportunity for you to reevaluate the values that you hold so dear. And are they serving you any longer? And if they're not, can we reframe them, and can they be reframed? And maybe you can do that work on your own. There's lots of DIYers out there. I'm like one of those guys that like to DIY. But there's a Hindu saying that says, if you help your brother's boat across the shore, guess what? Yours gets there as well. And so jump in and participate with the men's group. Participate, get a coach, get some help. At 59, I finally decided to hire a fitness coach. I haven't felt this great since I was 20. Take the opportunity to leap in. And just to give you a takeaway, go to my website right now. It's called awakenedman.net, and I have a free download for you. It's called Setting the Compass. It's an opportunity for you to assess what the last 12 months of your life was like, and then write a little headline. And then I'm going to ask you to assess what the upcoming 12 months would be like, and to write that headline. Give you a flavor for the kind of work we do here, and see if there's something that resonates with you. And so thank you so much, Rory, for having me on your show. I really appreciated our conversation today.
Thank you. I appreciate you too, man. Alan Dumonceaux, right?
Yeah, it's perfect.
All right, there we go. Yeah, host, creator of the Revolutionary Man podcast and movement. Yeah, it's been great, and I will have all the stuff in the show notes for everybody. And thank you for being here today, brother.
Thank
Uh,
you, man.
Folks, this has been another awesome episode of the Power Man podcast, where once again we're demonstrating that there's power in the collective. There's the rising tide raises all boats. We're all here to help one another, and it matters. The reason we bring powerful men like this onto the program to talk about very powerful subjects like we have today is because we are united in being behind you in your mission to be a better provider, a better leader, better protector tomorrow than you are today, to be a better father, a better husband, a better man tomorrow than you are today. And the reason we want that for you is because you matter. You have value. And at some point, you just have to believe it. Until next time.